The blue glow of my monitor cast shadows across the garage at 2:47 a.m. when I heard my wife's voice drifting through the thin walls of our converted home office. Sarah was supposed to be asleep, but there she was, whispering into her phone with the kind of breathless excitement I hadn't heard from her in years. "God, Jake, I can't wait to get rid of him," she giggled. "The IPO goes public next month, and then I can finally dump David's pathetic ass. He actually thinks he built this company." I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, where I'd been debugging the core algorithm that powered our startup's entire platform. The same algorithm I'd spent 3 years perfecting while Sarah schmoozed investors and played CEO in her glass office downtown. Jake Morrison, her head of marketing. The frat boy with the expensive suits and the BMW who always looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. Of course it was Jake. "The best part," Sarah continued, her voice getting clearer as she moved closer to our shared wall. "David signed that NDA so tight he can't even sneeze about the code without getting sued into oblivion. Once we're public, I'll own everything. His precious little algorithms, the patents, all of it." My phone buzzed. A text from our 19-year-old daughter Emma, away at college. "Dad, Mom says you're the biggest obstacle in her life. Maybe you should just disappear. LOL. Team Mom forever." I stared at the message, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Team Mom forever. Right. I'd built this company from nothing. While Sarah networked at cocktail parties, I'd lived in this garage, surviving on energy drinks and determination, creating something revolutionary, a platform that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy. Sarah had the business degree and the connections, so she became the face of the company. I stayed in the background, the invisible genius, content to let her have the spotlight. What a fucking mistake. I opened our shared server and started browsing through Sarah's private folders. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her what dirty really looked like. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a folder labeled Marketing Materials that definitely didn't contain marketing materials. Video after video of Sarah and Jake. In her office, on my desk, against the window overlooking the city I'd helped build her empire in. The timestamps showed they'd been at it for months. Sometimes during board meetings I was banned from attending because I wasn't management material. I saved everything to an encrypted drive, my hands surprisingly steady. 22 years of marriage, 3 years of building a company together. All of it reduced to a collection of amateur porn videos featuring my wife and her boy toy. The next morning, Sarah strutted into the kitchen wearing her power suit and that smug smile she reserved for conquered territories. "Sleep well, honey?" she asked, pouring herself coffee from the machine I'd programmed to start at exactly 6:30 a.m. "Like a baby," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. "Good, because we need to talk about your attitude at work. Jake thinks you've been undermining the marketing department's initiatives." Jake thinks. Of course he does. Really? What kind of undermining? The eye rolling, the sarcastic comments during presentations, the way you act like you're better than everyone else just because you can write code. I closed my laptop and looked at her directly. "You're right. I have been acting like I'm better than everyone else." She blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. "Because I am better than everyone else, at least at the things that matter, like building the product that's about to make you very, very rich." Her smile faltered. "David, what's gotten into you?" "Clarity," I said, standing up. Pure, beautiful clarity. I kissed her cheek, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. "Have a great day at work, sweetheart. I know I will." The look on Sarah's face when she found my resignation letter was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building her dream company. I'd positioned myself perfectly in the parking garage across the street, watching through binoculars as she stormed into the office at 8:15 a.m., Jake trailing behind her like a lost puppy. My phone started ringing immediately. I let it go to voicemail. "David, what the hell do you think you're doing? Call me back right now." Then Jake called. I answered that one. "Hey buddy," his voice was trying for casual, but landing somewhere around panicked. "Sarah showed me your letter. Pretty funny joke, right? You had us going for a minute there." "No joke, Jake. I quit. Effective immediately." But you can't quit. You're essential personnel. The IPO is in 3 weeks. "I know exactly when the IPO is. I also know that without me, you don't have a product to sell. Just a pretty website and some marketing bullshit about revolutionary algorithms that you couldn't explain if your life depended on it. David, be reasonable. We can work this out." "Can we?" Because according to the company bylaws, the ones I actually read, any essential personnel leaving within 90 days of a public offering triggers a mandatory review of all intellectual property agreements. Silence. That's right, Jake. I did my homework. Every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that makes this company valuable, it's all mine. And as of this morning, I've filed an injunction preventing the company from using any of my work without my explicit written consent. You can't do that. I just did. Check with legal. They'll explain it to you using small words. I hung up and immediately called my old mentor, Professor Williams, who now sat on our board of directors. He'd been pushing for months to give me more equity and recognition. Time to see if his support extended beyond faculty meetings. David, I just heard about your resignation. What's going on? I'm done being invisible, Professor. Sarah wants to pretend she built this company? Let her try to run it without me. This is about more than recognition, isn't it? The old man was sharp. Let's just say I've discovered some irregularities in management behavior that make continued employment uncomfortable. I see. Well, the board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation. I assume you'll be filing a hostile work environment claim, among other things. Good. It's about time someone held Sarah accountable. She's been riding your coattails since day one, and everyone knows it. After we hung up, I drove to Murphy's Gym, a grimy boxing club in the old industrial district where I'd been training for the past 2 years. The owner, Big Mike Murphy, was exactly what you'd expect from someone named Big Mike Murphy. 6'4", scarred knuckles, and a bullshit detector that could spot a fake from 3 blocks away. You look like someone who just burned down his own house, Mike said as I walked in. Something like that. How do you feel about helping a friend send a message? Mike grinned, showing a gold tooth. What kind of message? The kind that doesn't involve anyone getting hurt, but makes it very clear that certain people should mind their own business. I'm listening. I explained the situation, leaving out the personal details but emphasizing that my soon-to-be ex-wife and her boyfriend might try to steal my property. Mike nodded along, occasionally grunting approval. So you need some deterrent, he said finally. Exactly. Well, it just so happens that me and the boys have been looking for something to do tonight. Community service, you might call it. That evening, I waited in my garage with the lights off. Sure enough, around 11 p.m., Sarah's BMW pulled into the driveway, followed by Jake's flashy red Corvette. They sat in the cars for a few minutes, probably psyching themselves up for their little breaking and entering adventure. They crept around to the side door, Sarah fumbling with her key while Jake kept watch. What they didn't see were the 3 shadows detaching themselves from the trees around my property. Well, well, Mike's voice boomed out of the darkness. What do we have here? Sarah shrieked. Jake jumped so high I thought he might clear the fence. Looks like a couple of thieves to me, said Tommy, Mike's nephew and sparring partner. Should we call the cops, Mike? Now hold on, Jake stammered, his prep school accent getting thicker under stress. This is a misunderstanding. We're not thieves. This is her husband's house. Her husband's house, repeated Sal, the third member of their welcoming committee. But not her house, right? Because if it was her house, she wouldn't need to sneak around in the dark. I stepped out of the garage, flipping on the floodlights. Evening, honey. Jake, out for a romantic stroll? David, thank God, Sarah said, trying to recover her composure. We were just breaking into my workshop to steal my backup drives. Yeah, I figured. It's company property, Jake said, puffing out his chest. You can't just take it. Mike stepped closer to Jake, all 6'4" of him. Son, you seem confused about whose property you're on and who you're talking to. Maybe you should apologize to Mr. Chen here and get back in your fancy car. It's actually Mr. Patterson, I corrected, but the advice stands. Jake looked around at the 3 very large, very unfriendly men surrounding him, then back at his pristine Corvette. This isn't over, David. You're absolutely right, I said. It's not. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 a.m. the next morning. I wasn't invited, but Professor Williams kept me updated via text throughout the proceedings. Sarah trying to explain your mental breakdown. Not going well. Jake presenting plan to rebuild core systems. Board asking uncomfortable questions. Legal counsel explaining IP situation. Sarah's face is priceless. Vote of no confidence being discussed. Your timing was perfect. By noon, it was over. Sarah was out as CEO, pending resolution of the intellectual property dispute and a thorough investigation into her management practices. The board had appointed Professor Williams as interim CEO, with a mandate to restore confidence and competence to company leadership. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with calls from Sarah, but I was busy with more important matters. Specifically, I was sitting in the offices of Morrison and Associates, no relation to Jake Morrison, thankfully, with the best intellectual property lawyer in the city. "Your case is airtight," Jennifer Morrison told me, reviewing the contracts and documentation I'd brought. "The company has no legal right to use your code without your permission. The question is what you want to do about it. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Revenge isn't a legal strategy, Mr. Patterson. No, but justice is. And justice says that if you build something, you should own it. If you contribute to something's success, you should share in the rewards. And if someone betrays your trust, they should face the consequences." She leaned back in her chair. "What did you have in mind?" I outlined my plan. It was elegant, legal, and absolutely devastating. Jennifer listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "It's aggressive," she said finally, "but it's also completely legitimate. When do you want to start?" "Yesterday." The first phase was already in motion. I'd contacted Marcus Webb, a tech journalist who'd been following our company's rise with interest. Marcus was hungry, ambitious, and had no love for corporate executives who took credit for other people's work. The story he published that afternoon was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, the genius behind the curtain. How Sarah Patterson built her empire on her husband's code. The article laid out everything: my role in developing the core technology, Sarah's systematic marginalization of my contributions, and the suspicious timing of my departure just weeks before the IPO. Marcus had done his homework, interviewing former employees who confirmed that I was the real brains behind the operation. But the real bombshell was buried in the middle of the piece: a detailed analysis of the company's code repository, showing that 93% of the critical systems bore my digital signature. Without me, the company was essentially selling an empty shell. The stock price, which had been climbing steadily toward the IPO, crashed within hours, down 40% by market close. Sarah finally cornered me at Murphy's gym that evening. She'd somehow figured out where I'd been training and was waiting by my car when I came out. "You bastard," she hissed. "You're destroying everything we built." "Everything I built," I corrected. "You just took the credit." "That's not true and you know it. I raised the money. I found the clients. I built the business. You built a house of cards on my foundation. And now that I've pulled out the foundation, you're upset that it's collapsing." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "David, please, we can work this out. I'll give you whatever you want. Equity, recognition, a seat on the board. What I want is for you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you care about." What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was a video file, clearly labeled with yesterday's date and timestamp. Her face went white. "You see, Sarah, while you were busy planning to steal my work, I was busy documenting yours. Turns out our office security system keeps backups of everything for 90 days. Everything. I wouldn't what? Show the world what kind of person you really are? Prove that you've been violating your fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders? Demonstrate that your business meetings with Jake were actually something else entirely?" She lunged for my phone, but I was faster. Years of boxing training had given me reflexes she couldn't match. "Here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "You're going to resign from the board. You're going to sell your shares back to the company at cost. And you're going to disappear from my life forever. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, every major tech blog in the country gets a very interesting video collection, along with a detailed explanation of how you've been defrauding investors and shareholders." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered. "I'm the same person I've always been. You just never bothered to pay attention." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled demolition. I watched from a distance as Sarah's world crumbled piece by piece, each collapse carefully orchestrated, but appearing completely natural to outside observers. First, Jake cracked under pressure. The board's investigation into company finances had uncovered some creative expense reporting, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, and weekend conferences that looked suspiciously like personal entertainment. When confronted with the evidence, Jake threw Sarah under the bus so fast it left skid marks. "It was all her idea," he told the investigators. She said it was standard practice for executives. I just followed her lead. The board was not amused. Jake was terminated for cause, his stock options forfeited, and he was banned from the premises. I heard through the grapevine that his fiancée had also dumped him after seeing some interesting photos that had somehow found their way to her Instagram DMs. Sarah tried to fight the board's decision, but her position was untenable. Professor Williams had done his homework, documenting every instance of financial irregularity, every questionable decision, every abuse of company resources. The final blow came when Emma, our daughter, posted a TikTok video mocking her mother's corporate meltdown and calling her an embarrassment to successful women everywhere. Kids these days, no loyalty at all. The hostile work environment lawsuit I'd filed was proceeding smoothly, with Jennifer Morrison building an airtight case. Former employees were lining up to testify about Sarah's toxic management style, her habit of taking credit for other people's work, and her inappropriate relationship with Jake. The company's insurance carrier was already talking settlement numbers that would make me very comfortable for the rest of my life. But money wasn't the point anymore. This was about something deeper. I was in my garage, working on the new company I'd started with my former protege Kevin Liu, when my phone rang. Unknown number. David? It's me. Sarah's voice was different, smaller, defeated. I know what you want to hear, she continued. That I'm sorry. That I made mistakes. That I wish things had been different. Do you? I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry my plan didn't work. I'm sorry you turned out to be smarter than I thought. I had to admire her honesty, even if it was too little too late. But I'm not sorry I tried, she said. You were holding me back, David. You and your need to be the invisible genius, working in the shadows while other people got things done. I needed to be free of that. How's that freedom working out for you? About as well as you'd expect. I'm unemployable in tech. My reputation is destroyed. Emma won't return my calls. I'm living in a studio apartment and working as a consultant for companies that can't afford anyone better. Sounds rough. The thing is, David, I know you're not done. This whole thing has been too calculated, too perfect. You're building towards something bigger. She was right, of course, but I wasn't about to confirm it. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Just, when you make your final move, whatever it is, remember that we were married for 22 years. That has to count for something. It does count for something, I said. It counts for making this personal. The line went dead. Kevin looked up from his laptop. Was that her? Yeah. I think she knows what's coming. Good. She should. Kevin had been one of my best students when I taught part-time at the university, before Sarah convinced me to focus full-time on the company. He'd joined us as a junior developer and quickly proved himself invaluable. He was also one of the few people who knew the full extent of my contributions to the company's success. The new platform is ready for beta testing, he said. It's everything the old system was, plus about 30% more functionality. Perfect. How's our funding situation? Professor Williams came through with the seed money. We've also got interest from 3 major VCs who are very curious about what the real genius behind Patterson Industries is working on now. Patterson Industries. Sarah had insisted on using her maiden name for the company, claiming it sounded more professional than Chen Patterson Industries. Another little humiliation I'd swallowed in the name of marital harmony. Any word from the tech conference? Kevin grinned. They accepted your keynote proposal. The future of predictive analytics, lessons from the trenches. You're the opening speaker on the main stage. Excellent. And the guest list. Everyone who matters in the industry will be there, including some people who might be very interested to hear your perspective on recent events. The Tech Future Conference was the industry's biggest annual gathering, 3 days of presentations, networking, and deal-making that could make or break careers. This year's theme was Innovation and Integrity in the Digital Age, which seemed almost too perfect to be coincidental. Almost. The Moscone Center in San Francisco was packed with 2,000 of the tech industry's most influential people when I walked onto the main stage. The morning keynote slot was prime real estate. Everyone was caffeinated, alert, and ready to hear about the next big thing. What they got instead was a masterclass in corporate revenge. Good morning, I began, looking out at the sea of faces. My name is David Patterson, and until recently, I was the invisible man behind Patterson Industries' revolutionary predictive analytics platform. A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew the story by now. The mysterious genius who'd brought down his own company in a spectacular display of corporate warfare. I'm here today to talk about innovation, integrity, and what happens when those two things come into conflict with ambition and greed. The presentation was flawless. I'd spent weeks crafting every slide, every transition, every perfectly timed revelation. I started with the technical details of our breakthrough algorithm, explaining in simple terms how we'd achieved 94% accuracy in market prediction. The audience was hooked. This was the kind of inside information they'd paid thousands of dollars to hear. Then I pivoted to the business side, how the technology had been developed, who had contributed what, and how credit had been distributed. I showed organizational charts, code repositories, patent filings, all the boring administrative details that told the real story of who had built what. At this point, I said, clicking to the next slide, you might be wondering why I'm sharing all this proprietary information with you. The answer is simple. It's not proprietary anymore. The slide showed the logo of my new company, Chen Analytics. Clean, professional, and unmistakably mine. 3 weeks ago, I launched Chen Analytics with a single mission: to prove that innovation comes from individuals, not institutions. That credit should go where credit is due, and that integrity isn't just a buzzword, it's a competitive advantage. I clicked again. The new slide showed a side-by-side comparison of Patterson Industries' platform and Chen Analytics' new system. The improvements were obvious and dramatic. Our beta platform outperforms the old system by 37% in accuracy and 60% in processing speed. We're launching publicly next month, with backing from Andreessen Horowitz and 3 other top-tier VCs. The audience was buzzing now. This wasn't just a keynote. It was a product launch, a corporate assassination, and a comeback story all rolled into one. But technology is only half the story, I continued. The other half is about the culture we create around innovation. Do we reward the people who actually build things? Or do we reward the people who are best at taking credit? I clicked to the final slide. It was a simple quote. The best revenge is massive success. Ms. Frank Sinatra. The applause was thunderous. During the Q&A session, a journalist from TechCrunch asked the question I'd been waiting for. Mr. Patterson, there have been reports about irregularities in your former company's management practices. Can you comment on that? I can't comment on ongoing legal proceedings, I said. But I will say this, when you build something with your own hands, you know every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that makes it work. And when someone tries to take that away from you, you have 2 choices. You can accept it, or you can prove them wrong. Which did you choose? I smiled. I think that's obvious. After the presentation, I was mobbed by investors, journalists, and competitors wanting to know more about Chen Analytics. Business cards flew like confetti, and my calendar filled up with meetings for the next 3 months. But the moment I'd been waiting for came during the networking lunch. Sarah appeared at my table, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. Quite a show, she said, sitting down uninvited. Thank you, I've been practicing. David, we need to talk. No, we don't. We're divorced, remember? The papers were finalized last week. This isn't about us, it's about Emma. Our daughter, the one wild card in my carefully orchestrated revenge. What about her? She's been expelled from college, academic dishonesty. Apparently, she's been paying other students to write her papers for the past 2 years. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How is that my problem? She learned it from us, David, from watching how we treated each other, how we lied and manipulated and schemed. She thinks that's how the world works. She chose her side. Team Mom forever, remember? Sarah's composure finally cracked. She's 19 years old. She's a kid who made stupid choices because her parents were too busy destroying each other to teach her right from wrong. I tried to teach her right from wrong. You taught her that winning was the only thing that mattered. And what are you teaching her now? That revenge is more important than family? I looked across the crowded conference hall, at all the successful, ambitious people networking and deal-making and building their empires. Emma wasn't here. She was somewhere in Ohio, facing the consequences of choices she'd made based on lessons she'd learned from watching her parents. She can figure it out, I said finally. Just like I did. Sarah stared at me for a long moment. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm exactly who I've always been. I'm just not hiding it anymore. She left without another word. That evening, Chen Analytics announced a $50 million Series A funding round, led by Andreessen Horowitz. The press release quoted Mark Andreessen himself. David Patterson represents everything we look for in a founder: technical brilliance, market vision, and the integrity to build something that matters. Patterson Industries' stock price fell another 20% in after-hours trading. I celebrated alone in my hotel room, watching the sunset over San Francisco Bay and planning my next move. Because Sarah was right about one thing. I wasn't done yet. The best revenge is massive success. But sometimes, massive success is just the beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom of Patterson Industries, watching the final act of my carefully orchestrated drama unfold. The company was being acquired by Chen Analytics in a deal that valued my former employer at roughly 30 cents on the dollar of its pre-collapse worth. Professor Williams, still serving as interim CEO, looked exhausted but relieved. "David, I have to ask, did you plan this from the beginning?" "Plan what?" I replied innocently. "Building a better product and letting the market decide its value? You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. The acquisition wasn't just a business transaction. It was a complete vindication of everything I'd argued for during my years in Sarah's shadow. Chen Analytics wasn't just buying Patterson Industries' assets. We were absorbing their entire customer base, their contracts, their market position, everything Sarah had built on my foundation. The irony was perfect. In trying to cut me out of the company's success, Sarah had ensured that I would ultimately own all of it. "The board has one final question," Professor Williams said. "What happens to the Patterson Industries brand?" I'd been waiting for this moment for months. The Patterson Industries brand will be retired. All products and services will be migrated to the Chen Analytics platform within 90 days. Sarah's name, her legacy, her contribution to the tech industry, all of it would disappear as if it had never existed, just like she'd tried to do to me. And the employees? We'll be keeping about 60% of the technical staff. The rest will receive generous severance packages and excellent references. What I didn't mention was that the 40% we were letting go consisted entirely of Sarah's loyalists, the people who had participated in or enabled her systematic marginalization of my contributions. They would land on their feet eventually, but they would do it knowing that their former victim was now their judge. The meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations. Professor Williams pulled me aside as the others filed out. "I'm proud of you, David. You've handled this entire situation with remarkable professionalism." "Thank you, Professor. That means a lot coming from you. But I have to ask, was it worth it? The stress, the conflict, the damage to your family." I thought about Emma, who had finally reached out to me the week before. She was working as a barista in Portland, trying to figure out her life after the college expulsion. Our conversation had been awkward but civil. She didn't apologize for choosing her mother's side, but she didn't defend that choice either. "Ask me in 10 years, I said finally. That evening, I drove to Murphy's gym for what would be my last workout in the old neighborhood. Big Mike was waiting for me with a beer and a grin. "So," he said, "how does it feel to be a tech mogul?" "Pretty much the same as being a tech nobody, except with better lawyers." "And your ex-wife? How's she handling her new career in irrelevance?" I'd heard through the grapevine that Sarah was working for a small consulting firm in Austin, helping startups with their business development. It was honest work, probably more honest than anything she'd done in years, but it was a long way from the corner office and the magazine covers she'd once enjoyed. "She's surviving," I said. "That's more than she deserves. You ever think about reaching out, burying the hatchet?" "The hatchet is buried, Mike, right between her shoulder blades." He laughed, but there was something in his expression that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with my answer. "You know, David, I've seen a lot of guys get their revenge over the years. Boxers who came back to beat the fighter who humiliated them. Businessmen who destroyed competitors who screwed them over. And you know what I've noticed?" "What's that?" "The ones who enjoy it too much. They usually don't know when to stop." I finished my beer and stood up. "Good thing I'm stopping then." "Are you?" The question followed me home, echoing in my mind as I walked through my empty house. The divorce had been finalized. The company acquisition was complete, and my new venture was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. By any objective measure, I had won completely and decisively. So why didn't it feel like enough? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the acquisition. You've proven your point. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. There were so many things I could say, so many ways I could twist the knife one final time. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. Some victories are too complete to share with the defeated. The next morning, I woke up in my new penthouse apartment overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Chen Analytics was valued at $800 million and growing. I had everything I'd ever wanted: recognition, respect, financial security, and the satisfaction of knowing that everyone who had underestimated me now understood exactly what they had lost. I opened my laptop and began writing my next keynote speech for the upcoming Tech Future conference. The theme this year was Building the Future, Lessons from Disruption. I had a lot of lessons to share. The speech began with a simple premise. In business, as in life, there are only two kinds of people: those who create value and those who take credit for it. The secret to lasting success is making sure you're always in the first category and that everyone knows it. I spent the rest of the morning crafting the perfect presentation, one that would cement my reputation as not just a brilliant technologist, but as a visionary leader who had overcome betrayal and adversity to build something revolutionary. It would be my final word on the subject of Sarah Patterson and her failed attempt to erase me from history. After this speech, I would never mention her name in public again. She would simply fade into irrelevance, a cautionary tale about what happens when ambition exceeds integrity. As I put the finishing touches on the presentation, I realized that Mike had been wrong about one thing. I did know when to stop. This speech would be my last act of revenge, and then I would move on to building something even greater. The best revenge isn't just massive success, it's making your enemies irrelevant to your success. I saved the file, closed my laptop, and looked out at the city where I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of my marriage. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably starting another ordinary day at her ordinary job, trying to forget that she had once been somebody important. But I would never let the world forget. Every success of Chen Analytics, every innovation we brought to market, every industry award we won, would be a reminder of what she had lost when she chose betrayal over partnership. I had won everything. She had lost everything. And the beautiful part was that she had done it to herself. I smiled and started planning my next company.